Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about high technology and mechanical watches because it's an interesting irony, one of the more fun ironies, I guess, in the world, that a field of endeavor as deep, as long of a heritage as mechanical watches today actually has an incredibly high level of technology involved. I mean, let's start with at our level. Let's not even talk about manufacturing or anything else like that. Time grapher. This is a device that I can hook my watch up to, and it will tell me everything about that watch I need to know. I mean, and all from just the sound the watch makes. So, and the funny thing is, it's not even that sophisticated a computer inside to do that kind of work because, in one sense, it's extremely complicated. And the term complication and complicated actually come from watches. A function in a watch is called a complication. And over time, people associated complication with watches or complications of watches. So they would use the word complicated to compare it to something else. For example, for a long time, people used to talk about the insides of machinery things as clockworks or watchworks because mechanical technology dominated the day till about the early 30s, you know, right around the end of World War One or so, which is actually the 20s. But there was a transition. There was a transition from mechanical world to electronic world. And that is even migrating. I mean, like I'll throw something at you that you probably haven't thought about just to give you an idea, something to think about. Oh, hey Daniel, how you doing? Greetings and long life. Um, think about something as simple as magnets and magnetism. We deal with it in watches because a watch with a ferrous, which means iron based, um, because that's the name. That's why it says Fe on the periodic table under iron. So a ferrous material. But then again, when it comes to watch and hairsprings, it might not have any iron or steel in it, but it might still be magnetically influenced. But odds are it's going to have at least some steel in it, unless it uses in more advanced technology, like for example the parachrome hairspring in the latest Rolexes, right? If you think about, or yeah, the 126610. This has got the parachrome hairspring and the new energy escapement. I forget the exact buzzword for their version of a low energy escapement, like the Daniels coaxial escapement. And the Seiko also came out with their own version of a low energy escapement, whereas instead of more of the staccato uh, punching at each other that happens in an escapement, it's more of a pushing and more gentle movement, which allows the escapement to last longer with less maintenance. And if you use silicon parts, like for example, in the escapement wheel or the pallet fork, pardon me, in the escapement wheel or the pallet fork, you can have a movement that lasts a long time. I mean, when Zenith, who is notorious for service, right? In the old timey days, because it's a 5 hertz movement, it's a 10 beats a second, it's a high beat mechanism, and it's got a gajillion parts in it because it's a first generation automatic chronograph. Um, Now that they have a silicon escapement, this watch has, by an order of magnitude, improved its reliability and serviceability and operating lifetime. And using silicon as a material isn't even, I mean, it just breaks the ice when it comes to advanced technologies that are in watches and watch movements. I mean, if you think about it, even the plastic pallet fork and escapement wheel in the Tissot's version of the Tissot PRX version of the Powermatic 80, because not all Powermatic 80s have plastic parts, but the PRX does. But that was how they were able to get a mechanical movement at that low a price. Think of the Powermatic 80 as a high-end version of the System 51 movement, because the Powermatic 80 is a direct linear descendant of the System 51. The System 51 was developed by Swatch a few years ago, and it was the first completely machine-made watch movement without any human hands involved, and it only had one screw. Everything else was ultrasonically welded or glued together. And the Powermatic 80 uses those technologies to give a basic, I hate the term entry level, a basic Swiss luxury watch at a reasonable price, and I would even say price point, because there are people who say, "Ooh, what do you say price point instead of price?" But price point means more price category. So in other words, in the $500 to $1,000 price range, the PRX offers a lot for the buck. Now, Seiko offers a lot for the buck in that range too. A lot of companies offer a lot for the buck in that range. And the Swatch Group, Tissot, achieves it by using plastic parts. Now, silicon parts are in the other direction. They're actually a more refined solution, because silicon, you're basically making engineered glass. It's glass as a physical material. We're not talking about it as a semiconductor. And by the way, semiconductors are pretty much obsolete for power electronic applications. By the way, if you work in power electronics, you better start looking up gallium nitride and silicon carbide. But as a physical material, silicon is a very good material for watchmaking. I mean, even Bill Sanders over at Watch Art Sci, he's not a big fan, and well, actually, he's totally negative on silicon hairsprings, because they can't be repaired. You can't work with them. They have to be replaced. And he's worried if there are no spare parts in the future, you're screwed. But a silicon pallet fork will probably last forever. I mean, unless there's some damage vector, like the watch having a serious impact or something of that nature, won't corrode, doesn't need lubrication. It's glass, right? I mean, we find pieces of glass that, if they haven't been broken, are the same pristine shape that they were when the Romans used to drink out of them. So, and that's, like I said, material science, that's only the beginning, because once you start talking about things like parachrome, I mean, material science has always affected watches. If you go back to what they call German silver, which is really kind of like a brass alloy, because it has zinc and brass and some other materials to make just a well made solid. Because the thing about watches is there are two issues you want. You want it to be thermally stable. You don't want the metal to warp under temperature or get bigger or smaller to too great a degree, because if you have different parts and they in under thermal situations, they maybe heat or grow at different rates, you can have mismatching of gears and the like, which is why the Rolex failed in the NASA tests and several other watches. They had thermal expansion issues with the movement. And I believe the Wittenauer also used the same movement as the Rolex for the NASA trials. And the Omega Speedmaster did not have any issues with it. And German silver, which is, like I said, actually a brass alloy, is still used to this day as a base plate material and all, because it takes well to engraving. It's nice and hefty. It's solid. It doesn't flex a lot, and it's well suited for watchmaking. And that technology's like over 100 years old. But then when you fast forward and you talk about things like silicon parts and parachrome hairsprings, like the Rolex parachrome hairsprings are metallic, but they're using very exotic materials to create that hairspring, which is why it is non-magnetic. Hey, L Train, how's it going? Geek, go out on time, of course. Hey, Gian, hey, how's it going? Gian, Alex, I got to say by metaphor, if Etta and Salida, et cetera, are the tomahawk and sirloin steaks, then the Powermatic 80 is the vegan option. Well, That's an interesting way to look at it, actually. Um, Although I must admit, if I think it's more in the other direction, is that it's the McDonald's hamburger. It's the processed food. It uses the plastic parts to achieve, and it does achieve, a lightweight mechanical movement with 80 hours of power reserve at a reasonable cost. They can get away with a thinner mainspring, for example, something along those lines. Because I bet you money that the Powermatic 80 variants from the other companies have other engineering enhancements in the case of that. Because if you want to keep all metal parts, you're going to have to beef it up, and they probably have a thicker or longer mainspring to provide more energy to the movement. You know, or the Powermatic 80 has enough built-in wiggle room that switching to a metal escapement doesn't dig into it far enough for you to not be able to say 80 hours. But the Powermatic 80 isn't purist in the vegan sense, if I may counter argue. I would say that the Powermatic 80 is streamlined in the processed food sense. They're putting the plastic parts in because they are lighter and they don't require lubrication. And barring, I mean, it's plastic. And a pallet fork is not a big thing, but it is not a flimsy, thin piece of metal like a spring or, some of the other gearing or mechanisms that are in a watch movement. That pallet fork and that escapement wheel in a Powermatic 80, those two plastic parts, will probably outlast all the other parts in that watch. Let's be serious. The plastics, I mean, what's going to happen to the plastic pallet fork? Nothing. And it doesn't require lubrication. And it's lightweight. So it's going to be banging away in that Powermatic 80. Other parts will break before that happens. And oh, by the way, if I almost forgot to say this because I wanted to point this out to several people who asked about the the PRX. If you really like the PRX and you don't want a Powermatic 80, get the Chrono, because that's got a Value 7753 in it. So if you get the PRX chronograph, it has actually a quite well-respected movement, which actually segues finally, 13 minutes in, segues finally into the topic. Although I have been talking about high technology, but I wanted to start with the Value 7750, which the 7753 is one of the family, by the way. Gian, I can't believe after watching for about a year, I became a watch snob like this. Well, no, don't be a snob. Be an enthusiast. Care, but don't judge. Observe, but don't denigrate. If the person's watch is not to your taste, say, that's interesting. My mom said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing. And they are a watch anybody wearing a mechanical watch or even a watch with hands today, if someone's wearing a watch with hands today, if they're wearing a watch with hands today, they're part of the club. They may not be, a 43rd level wizard mason watch collector, but they're in the club and they are attending the meetings and they pay their dues and they're wearing the watch. So yeah, be an enthusiast, not a snob. Pretty please, for me. I'm not anybody, like I said, I'm not an arbiter or anything, but if you're watching the show and you like what I do, be a nice watch collector. Oh, Gian, fair enough. The Powermatic is the fast food of movements. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you agree with me, because I wasn't trying to I know what I'm talking about, but I do believe that aspect of, because they didn't under-engineer the Powermatic 80. They over-engineered the Powermatic 80. They put a lot of effort into making that watch be able to do what it does. And that watch was also designed, actually, it was designed even more in the direction of computer design than the Value 7750, which is what I wanted to start this whole episode of 15 minutes ago about. Weppington, Glocks are plastic. Yeah, the frames are plastic, yes, never underestimate the durability of some polymers, that's for sure. The big differentiator with plastic is how much expenditure you're putting into it. I mean, you could argue Kapton's a plastic, and that stuff's used in spacecraft. Um, you can make plastics that are hard as steel almost, you can make plastics that are as soft as butter. Um, Badly made plastics are the problem. Single-use plastics are the problem. You can make durable goods out of plastics. Plastics are good is a good material. Single-use and disposable plastics are the evil, or badly made plastics. Like, the reason that dashboards cracked in the, '70s and '80s is because the polymers they used, the solvents and esters would just evaporate out of them in the sunlight, and so leave the base materials, which would then just form a congealed mess on your dashboard. But no, plastics, there's nothing the key to using plastics is to use them sparingly and make sure people know that you're using plastics. The nice thing is that Tissot didn't lie about having plastic in the Powermatic 80. They just didn't tell anybody. And when the news came out, they didn't say, "Oh no, we're not using plastic." So that's okay. In other words, they made this movement to a price point and they succeeded. And like I said, the I would love to see somebody come and say that I got a broken plastic pallet fork on that Tissot Powermatic, because what force vector would damage a plastic pallet fork that wouldn't destroy something more sensitive inside that watch movement? If you dropped it hard enough to break the pallet fork, the crystal's shattered. The gears are all out of whack. The balance wheel probably popped out of this retention spring. No. Plastic is more of an aesthetic thing. I owned a PRX and I sold it on, but it was a nice watch. I had the automatic and I sold it on. I almost miss selling that on, but it's a nice piece. But I have so many dang watches. A wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Jaeger Cote Polaris three-hander, no date, on the well. I've ever since I got my hands on the factory rubber strap. I just leave it on the factory rubber, and they didn't have the buckle in stock, but luckily the same buckle from the leather fits the rubber, and so yeah, so that's all I wear on this watch now is the rubber strap. But I really think that it looks it's a very pretty watch. And today's Sunday, so I thought I'd dress up a little bit. But yeah, so back to the Value 7750. The 7750 was the first watch movement to be partially designed by computer, because back then the tech wasn't that sophisticated. So they used the computer to do things, polish the design, make sure things were doing laid out properly. The computer could go through a lot of mechanical iterations and make sure that everything's running smoothly together. Today, a computer designed movement, they're doing everything. I mean, in the old timey days, you had to do the math to make sure that the pinion was just the right size to take the force from the gear, and the gear was the right thickness and the right size to take the force from the other gear. There's a lot of material science in a watch design, and also mechanical engineering to make sure that all of the pieces are the right properties. Because, for example, if that pinion is too thick, right, it'll work, but you're adding unnecessary weight and size to the watch. So you want to make everything as small as possible, but yet still capable of doing the job. And a computer can help you a great deal with those kinds of calculations, because that's just grinding math. That's not the insight. The insight comes from the designer. So these, even even the latest modern watch movements, they're not designed by the computer. The computer doesn't think the movement up. The designer has the idea and uses the computer to polish that idea into a functional entity. But today, everything is taken care of. The mechanicals, the materials. It might even, in the electronics business, which is my day job, if you're using a collaborative online design software, uh, some of the best ones are tied into the supply chain directly. So if you specify a part, it will literally say that capacitor is not available. You should try some other capacitor in your design. So you could actually adjust on the fly today. And on the mechanical and on the case level, because maybe you're a watchmaker and you're buying hands, right? The software may tell you, well, I suggest using these hands because they're in stock over at XYZ company. Because if you're buying off the shelf and they don't have it, you don't get to build anything. So having your design software tied into the supply chain is a good thing. Now, in the case of the Value 7753, I mean, the 53 is just a variation of the 7750, which had a horizontal layout of the totalizers instead of a vertical layout of the totalizers. And in the gear rejiggering to give you that layout, they thought it was easier to just put a hidden pusher to change the date. I mean, the date would advance with the movement, but to change the date, instead of manipulating the crown mechanism more than it already had been to do the gearing to change the layout of the subdials, they just put a hidden pusher in to adjust the date. But the Value 7750 chronograph family, the reason it's still used to this day, and the reason it's in a lot of watches, even though it's notoriously, I can hear this thing rolling around in there. The Value 7751, or is the 51 the moon phase? I forget now, but this is the GMT Value 7750 variant, because that shows you what a workhorse it is. That it's one of those things like a utility vehicle that has 20 variants, because there's a Value 7750 with a moon phase and triple calendar. There's a Value 7750 GMT. There's a Value 7750 with a vertical totalizer layout, with a horizontal totalizer layout. My Cartier Santos has a 7750 base movement in it. My Universal Genève Senna Value 7750. Breitling Navitimer GMT. Oh, the newer ones are in-house movements, but a lot of that is because Swatch stopped selling their movements, ETA movements, to other companies, because Valjoux, the reason they call it the Valjoux 7750 is an homage to Valjoux. It's really the ETA 7750 because Valjoux was absorbed by ETA, but in honor of the phenomenal design that went into that movement, everybody calls it the Valjoux 7750. And it was the first movement designed on a computer. And the key innovation with the 7750, if I may say, is that it has a horizontal clutch, but it's not a traditional horizontal clutch, because people say, oh, vertical clutches are better because there's no amplitude loss, or almost no amplitude loss, when you engage the chronograph. The 7750 is a horizontal clutch arrangement, but it also has very little amplitude loss because it uses a movable pinion instead of an entire gear. And that the fact that it's just a pinion with a very small tooth sprocket on it allows it. It's a very small, lightweight piece, so there's not a lot of lag in the movement when it's engaged, which was polished with computer design. So, and the 7750 was just the first. Everything today now, and other advanced technologies are involved. Now you design it, you have your basic movement on the screen, and you 3D print a 3:1 scale. You make a big version of the movement in plastic on a 3D printer. Back in the old-timey days, they might have carved elements of movement in a large scale to understand what they were doing there, and probably a lot did. But to be able to just design it on a computer and bang it out in a 3D printer and then assemble it on your desk and see if the pieces move the way you expect them to, that's some sophisticated technology. So a modern mechanical watch, although it expresses a vintage approach to telling time, a modern mechanical watch is probably one of the most advanced manufactured products today, using every single modern technology, from probably today even AI assisted design to you know computer driven milling machines for the base. Well, on the hand finish, they make the blanks out of machined parts, but in a mainstream watch, everything's machined. And for example, Zelos is doing some very cool stuff with guilloche with CNC. So It's just a way to achieve things at a lower cost. And if you don't skimp, like Zealous with doing the guilloche dials, you're getting that value out of the equipment as opposed to just using the equipment to skimp. There's a difference between, like, well, that's Frederic Constant, right? That's one of the things that distinguish Frederic Constant out in the marketplace is they're a husband-wife team, and they decided, let's use modern manufacturing technology to make high horology accessible. And that's the best world timer under 10K, in my humble opinion, that you can buy. And I think it retails now for around 4 to 5 and change. I haven't looked lately, but I think it retails, yeah, around 5 and change. A comparable world timer, well, the Omega, for example, is 9, and that's more GMT with a world time presentation. It's not as flexible a world timer, frankly, as the Frederic Constant. And Frederic Constant, they work the tech handle. They work it as hard as they can to make sure that they get the most out of it. They do all the high horology stuff at a reasonable price. Let's take a look at some of the comments. Geeking out on time. I just saw a watch documentary short where the entire watch was made from mammoth ivory from a watchmaker way back from Siberia. Wow, it was the only material that was ubiquitous. Well, yeah. when you, when you live from hunting, you get a lot of teeth lying around. Yeah, but and the nice thing about ivory, it is, well, that's why they used to make things like piano keys and the like. It's a nice dense, nice dense solid material that's easily machined and takes a high level of finish. In other words, you can machine it to a good tolerance. You can machine ivory to probably micron tolerance and not have any issues with any of it. Good material. Where you get it from, not so much. Formula Whiplash. Lately, I've been drooling over the Polaris at my local AD. Is it worth the price point? Depending on the model. I mean, I was thinking about getting rid of this, but I'm not quite sure yet. But maybe we can talk. But it's the problem with the Polaris is that they raised their prices very recently, right? So this retails now for like 9 and change, and it used to retail for like 7 and change. I would like go on Chrono24 and Watchfinder and some of the other sites and see if you can find one used with box and papers. That's a watch I would buy used. I managed to luck out. I got this at retail on discount. They were doing a clearance. But I've bought quite a few watches used. I shouldn't say obviously, but I bought my sub used because I didn't feel like waiting 5 years for a watch. And I dug into my savings and I bit the bullet and I said, oh, what the heck? Because it celebrated my millionth view on the channel and 5,000 subscribers, which I thank you all for, because it wouldn't be, I mean, obviously without you, you're the subscribers. Without you, I wouldn't be anything. I'd just be some weird guy sitting in my living room talking to the walls about watches. Pound the drums. That's where the rubber meets the leather. Yeah, well, the rubber meets the road. Yeah, you got. The nice thing about mechanical engineering is it has to work. The gears mesh, all of that stuff. There's no software glitch in a mechanical movement. But as I was saying, a modern mechanical movement was designed on a computer, manufactured in an industry 4.0 level facility with CNC machines of the highest order. And like I said, down to your desk where you're pulling out a small computer just to make sure it's running right. Modern mechanical watches represent a lot of high technology. Gian, I forgot to tell you, you sold your Longines Spirit, Hydro Conquest 41. Watch taste does change. For me, however, as much as I admire the spirit, the crown is just too big and annoying my wrist. Well, you're like I said, your tastes do change because the if you're going to be a good collector, you're going to want to learn about what you're collecting, and you're going to want to learn as much as you can, and also you want to experience more. So you might wear one watch and go, wow, this is a nice watch. And then you have an opportunity to put a different watch on your wrist or change the strap, like put a NATO on something that normally has a metal strap like this Nomos and go, wow, I'm never putting a metal bracelet on my watch again. I mean, I do wear rubber and metal and leather and all. You should play with your straps, but um, your tastes on what you want to wear, how you want it to look, what functionality you're looking for, that's all going to change as you develop as a watch collector. In my case, I'm realizing that maybe one of the reasons I'm drifting more towards doing more GMTs lately is they're easier for my poor old ass eyes to read. Because if I don't have my glasses on, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on here without my glasses. But that is a beautiful watch, isn't it? And that's got the factory rubber on it. The nice thing is this is the newer rubber. The older one, the Breitling, was really deeply engraved, and it really made you look like a Ponce. And so I used to keep this on a Milanese, but then I saw the new rubber, and I'm like, oh, I want that. And so I had, again, just like on this one, I don't take this off the rubber strap anymore. The rubber strap suits the watch so well, I don't bother taking it off. You know. Let's see. Let's looky. Derek. Hey, Derek, how's it going? Just getting into collecting. Bought a Hamilton, but wish I had spent more. Looking at Tudor Black Bays now. Well, the Hamilton is a good basic piece. That's the kind of piece that you can keep after you grow your collection as your beater, for example, right? And if you're looking at the Black Bay, put a big jar and put watch on it and put the money in the jar. And while you're saving, don't just look at the Black Bay, look at some of the alternatives. Oris, Omega, Mito. Mito's got some nice pieces. I have a review of the Mito Chrono Diver, which really evokes the Omega, but not enough, which is why I sold it. But it is a beautiful piece. But if depending on what you're looking for, the nice thing is that even if you still wind up buying the Black Bay, if you do your homework and you do your research and you look at all these other pieces that are available, the Oris, divers or whatever, the Sea Star, the Mito, Ocean Star, and the Oris, I think it's the Sea Star. If you do your homework and still choose the Tudor, then you know it's because you took the time to look, and it wasn't that you were infatuated with the Tudor and focused on it and didn't bother to do the research, and then you bought the Tudor, and then you get buyer's remorse, and you're like, you know what? If I just saved a little bit more, I could have bought that Seamaster. Or if I saved a little more than that, I could have bought a used. And right now is a buyer's market for used Rolexes. Everyone's talking about the market collapsing and all of that other. That's only happening at the used product level. And to say that a watch is selling for 90% of its retail used, 20 years used, is not a market collapse, it's a market correction. Those used watches were overpriced to begin with. I mean, I'll be honest, I paid 12K for this, right? But it retails for 10 and change. And I felt that I'm willing to pay the premium. This is a 2-year-old piece. It's still on the Rolex warranty. But if you're gonna buy a Seamaster, you could buy a used Seamaster for 5 or 4, and it's retails for 6 plus. There's nothing wrong with buying used pieces. A lot of my pieces I bought used. Some pieces you can only buy used, like my IWC Saint-Supri UTC. They stopped making this. They only made 1,188 of these, but I really like this. This is this because I wanted an IWC Flieger, and this is a Flieger with a UTC, a GMT complication, and it's named after the guy who wrote The Little Prince. The funny thing about this, you notice how nice it looks on this strap. This is the Ratto strap from my Captain Cook. When I sold it, I kept the strap. I told the guy I kept the strap. I gave him an extra couple of straps in exchange. But it's interesting that, the Ratto strap suits this watch more than the factory IWC strap because it's got that plain calfskin brown with the white stitching, which isn't a bad strap, but I think the Sansupri is classier than that. And then, just to touch back on the tech topic really quickly again, I mean, just think of something like this with a high beat quartz in it, you know? That's what makes it different than a standard quartz because it's got a 260 something or other, 260 something. I can't read it right now. I don't have enough light. But it's a very high beat quartz mechanism. And this one's got a meteorite dial. Modern quartz watches, high-end modern quartz watches have a ton of tech in them. Actually, even cheap quartz watches have a ton of tech in them because they're very highly engineered to be inexpensive and simple. A lot of people don't appreciate the amount of engineering involved to make something cheap. you know um Even deliberately cheap takes a lot of effort, which is at that point, that's when you're like, yeah, why are you going that much effort to make something that's not going to work? But then that falls into the planned obsolescence side of the field, and we'll leave that to be. Which is the beautiful thing about watches is watches are one of the few finished goods where there's no planned obsolescence. There's no hidden break part in it to force you to go back and get a new one, like wheels on luggage that's perfectly functional, but once the wheel breaks, if you don't know how to replace it or get it fixed, the luggage is almost useless. They expect you to go buy a new piece of luggage. So at least in the case of watches, they're designed as durable goods. I mean, everyone buys, okay, maybe not a PRX, but well, if you bought the PRX Chrono, like I said, you would, because that's got the Value 7753 in it. But I mean, if you're buying a modern Swiss watch, Swiss mechanical watch, you're expecting to leave that to your grandchildren. And they know you're doing that. So they may say you got to have a high maintenance interval or some other thing servicing. But if that watch is properly maintained, it will outlive you and your kids. You know, um, your great great grandkids will be on the space station saying, "Hey, my dad had this sub back in the early 20th century, 21st, in the early 21st century." Wow, in the naughty knots. Um, and they expect that. So that's a nice thing about. Well, that's another nice thing about watches, which is another reason why they represent the pinnacle of manufacturing, because they want to make this as best, reliable, simple, light, effective, easy to make. I mean, they want it to be as perfect for them from the manufacturing point of view as they want it to be as perfect for you from the user point of view, because watches are an apex good, like apex predator, apex good, in that it is something that even at the simpler levels is a useful tool, and at the highest levels is a desirable want. That's just my humble opinion. See, Gian, you said before that my watch taste would change, right? We said that. Oh, I didn't treat the Hydro Conquest as a diver watch, but a Longines that ticks my ergonomics. Well, I got a couple of diver watches, and I used to belong to a swim club, and I've swum in the ocean, and I've snorkeled, but I've never done anything in water that warrants 200 meters of water resistance or 300. But I didn't buy, the various cars I've owned. Although here in Germany, I have driven them. It's pretty fast. Fastest I've ever driven was in a Golf GTI between Stuttgart and Munich. I hit 240 and change kilometers an hour for about a half hour, which is not, it's one thing to hit a high speed, but to maintain it for a decent period of time is awesome. Although you do get really paranoid driving past the people in the right lane. You're like, don't pull out, don't pull out, don't pull out. But cars and watches, what can you say? Oh, Derek just got into collecting. Welcome to the club. Bought a Hamilton. Oh, no, I read that already. Darn it. Derek, you might want to. Gian says you might want to look at Longines. They are. Longines got some good pieces. Like I said, do your homework. Do your homework. Your mileage may vary. Slave, hey, how's it going? Is Frederic Constant good? Hell yes, Frederic Constant is good. I own one myself. As I said, I have the World Timer, the old one. They also have this in the High Life integrated bracelet version, but I like this. I actually got a new alligator strap with white stitching just to help bring out that face a bit, but the factory buckle fit. So as long as you have the hardware, I mean, in the case of a leather strap, you can always swap it out because it's the hardware that matters on the piece. But no, the Frederic Constant, this is the best world timer under $10,000, in my humble opinion. I think it's a better world timer than the Aquatime, the Omega Aquaterra world timer, because the Omega Aquaterra world timer is a cool, robust watch, but it's really a GMT watch with it's a GMT watch, two time zone watch with a world timer function. This Frederic Constant is a breeze to set, easy to use, and it's well made, and it's it is a gorgeous, gorgeous watch. Look at that movement. Come on. Look at that movement. Look at it. All right. And you can get this watch used for under $4,000. You can get it new, like I think between 5 and 6. I had said 4 and 5, but I haven't looked in a long time because I bought this a while ago, luckily. And their prices are going up too. I don't think they're deliberately trying to price themselves up. I think in the Frederic Constant's case, they actually are pricing themselves based on their expenses and needs, which is why, like I said, I'm still, even though I really do love my Polaris. I do think JLC did us rough with their across the board price increase just to reposition themselves in the marketplace. Gian, question is, Seiko Prospect Alpinist GMT a good watch? Would I recommend it? Yes, but it is an office GMT, not a travel GMT. So it depends on why you're buying it. If you're not a big traveler and you just want to be able to track a time zone like, your mother in another state in the United States, or, well, there are a couple of places with multiple time zones. You're in England and they're in Czechoslovakia or whatever. The Alpinist is a great GMT. It's not a travel GMT, it's an office GMT. The GMT hand is independently settable, not the local hour hand. Like the San Zupri GMT, or, well, a lot of GMTs out there, but because the Seiko based GMT movement is an office GMT. But for example, the Miyota, the Citizens, they're all travel GMTs. That's why so many of these new micro brands are travel GMTs, because they're using those new Miyota movements. I would look into some of those micro brands, like the Zelos GMT, for example. That's a really sharp piece. Look into some of those, and because they're all roughly, because the Alpinist is a little steep. It's about $1,000 and change. And for that money, you could get yourself a Zelos or something along those lines, a Boulder. Look, I would poke around the micro brands if you wanted an interesting GMT, and then you can get a travel GMT for that at the same price too. And if you decide after your homework to buy the Seiko, then it was the right decision. Hey, Kareem. Hi. Greetings and long life. Geeking out on time. My first big purchase was a 2008 Seamaster 22.5 400, brand new for 1,200. See, goodbye. Hold on to it. That watch is at least worth $3K now. Easy. Probably more. At the time, I was vacillating between the 2254 and a Tag Aqua Racer. I think I chose wisely. Yes, you did. Nothing wrong with the Aqua Racer, but the Seamaster is a better watch. Sam, hey, how's it going, Sam? Like to start my collection on Longines or Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward has the more interesting pieces right now, and some of them are reasonably priced. But frankly, at that money, you can buy a Longines three-hander for what you're paying for, say, the Christopher Ward 12. You can get the new Longines three-hander, Conquest, I think it is, and that's a nice watch. And I would argue that the Longines is a better watch than the Christopher Ward. The Christopher Ward is a very good watch, but the Longines is a very, very good watch. I mean, there are watches that are better made than Longines, but you have to jump high. For example, they even get movements that nobody else in Swatch gets. Their master collection moon phase chrono with their 7751 in it, that's a column wheel chronograph. They make a variation of the 7750 with a column wheel for Longines. So they're both good watches, the Christopher Ward and the Longines. Christopher Ward is more of a, they're breaking into the mainstream, but they're still really trying to be an homage company. The 12 is not that original, whereas the Conquest is classic cool. I would say go to a shop, and the nice thing about it is all those watches are available at retail. I would go to a shop and try them on because you want to wear it on the wrist. You want to feel it. You want to look at it because they are different design languages. So it's an apples and orange, really. It would be like comparing Audi and BMW. They're both awesome companies, and neither, in my opinion, is better than the other, but they have radically different design philosophies, radically different fashion language. And so does Christopher Ward and Longines. So I'd go to a shop and try them on and see what tickles your fancy, blows your skirt up, which comes primarily from when they built the Flatiron Building in New York. That's where the term 23 Skidoo came from too, because the Flatiron Building, when it was first built, it was in the middle of a relatively empty space. Now it's surrounded by other skyscrapers, and its wedge shape created weird weather patterns around it, and women's skirts kept getting blown up around it, and guys would actually stand around the building and watch the women skirts blow up, and cops would tell them to get the hell out of there. Skidoo. So 23 Skidoo, because it was on 23rd Street. It still is on 23rd Street. They haven't moved it. But yeah, that's where the Flatiron is. I grew up in Queens. That's why I know. I might have read it somewhere, but I grew up in Queens. You learn a lot of New York-ese stuff when you're a New Yorker. So let's see. Kareem, I hope you're doing great also. I wanted to ask you how to make sure that a Rolex watch, for instance, the Submariner is original. Take it to a watchmaker. Have them open it up and look at the escapement. That's the only real way to know. Because they say there are super clones that can copy the escapement, but if it's that badass that it looks, that the escapement is that clean, and they have a parachrome hairspring, then it's probably a Frankenstein, not necessarily a fake. Frankensteins aren't nice watches either, but at least they have real Rolex movements in them and stuff. Frankensteins are, let's say I drop a watch and I break it or damage the case, and another watch, the movement went to crap because the guy left the crown open and dived, and a watchmaker will put the good movement from one watch into the good case of another. The serial numbers don't match up, just like VINs, a car VIN, the engine and the chassis, the VIN numbers don't match up. But for the average person, who cares? But at the prices that Rolex sell for, you don't want a Frankenstein watch because Rolex won't honor any service on it. I don't know if they would fix it for a steep price and do something like swap out the movement or do something crazy. I wouldn't risk it though. But yeah, take it to a jeweler, or like in my case, I actually do have the tools to take off the back of a case. What you want to do is you want to look at the escapement, because Rolexes are what they call a free sprung escapement. If you look at through the back of the watch, you'll see there's like two control arms coming off of the balance wheel in the I'm blanking. I just said the stupid escapement, but in the Rolex escapement, they use, and other companies that use a balance of that nature, they use weights around the perimeter of the balance wheel to adjust the speed instead of using one of the levers. So there's only one lever on a Rolex escapement, and it has a distinctive shape, and the parachrome hairspring has a distinctive blue hue. So yeah, if you're really worried, I mean, if you go over it with a loop, if it's fake, you could probably see it in the little details like the laser etch on the crystal or something like that, because they have a little laser etched crown on the crystal at 6 o'clock, and things of that nature. There are little tells if you go over it with a loop without having to go into it. But if you want to be 100% sure, go to a jeweler and have them open it up and look inside. And then you'll 99% know. If it's a magic super duper clone that fools a jeweler, it's probably, like I said, it's probably a Frankenstein. It's probably not a direct fake, you know. But your mileage may vary. It's actually, in my mind, it's more important to buy from a trusted dealer. I mean, the town I live in, there are a few high end watch shops that sell used pieces, and I trust them. And so I've purchased, like, well, actually, I bought both of these pieces from the same dealer, my Air King and my Sub. I bought them from the same guy, because when you're buying used Rolexes, trust is the most important thing, because a good dealer will make sure they only deal in good material, you know. So if you don't trust the dealer, ask them if they'll let you take it to a jeweler. And if they say no, then you know it's fake or they're not to be trusted. But if they say yes, then yeah, take it to the dealer and have them look at it, and then you're in business. Slave, I keep seeing Frederic Constant, but I kept seeing them as dress watches. I've never seen them as world timers. Well, frankly, in my mind, this is a dress watch. I wear this with a suit. You know, I mean, I do wear it like I would wear a collared shirt and jeans at the beer garden, but I consider this a dress watch. I don't consider, I mean, it does have I believe it has 100 meters. It is a rugged enough watch to be a daily wear, but I consider this a casual dress watch, casual up and up dress watch. The high life version of this is an integrated bracelet sports watch. But yeah, I think I do consider this a dress watch. I wear it with a suit. I wear this is one of the watches I wear when I go to trade shows with my suit. Milad, just check JLC Polaris Blue at their boutique. New look, not as good looking as mine. Oh, what they changed? Oh, that's right. They have been updating the line. This was the first generation Polaris. Buy used then. Get one of the older ones. And you can get, I was just on Chrono 24 because I was looking at it because someone had actually asked me if I would be interested in selling it, and I wanted to see what it's currently selling for. And you can get it for 7 and change right now online with the metal bracelet on Chrono 24. That's not a bad price. So yeah, used isn't a bad way to go with a watch like that, really. And if you buy from a dealer through Chrono 24, you have price guarantee and you have return guarantee and all that. So if you don't like the watch, they'll take it back and all that other good stuff. That doesn't apply to private sales on Chrono, but if you buy from a registered dealer on Chrono, you get satisfaction guarantee. So yeah, buy the Polaris used, in my humble opinion. Gian, speaking of Christopher Ward, why is there a bit of hate for them in the watch community? Because um, they're so successful. No, actually, I think what it is that they did a brand change, right? Just like Vermont is attempting, Christopher Ward had a brand change. They changed their look. They changed where they put the logo. They changed the logo design. They changed a bunch of stuff, and they've been successful since. But I don't think it's because of the branding change as much as the fact that they've been doing some really nice watches like the Belcanto and some other things. That's how you get respect in the industry. Like Horage, which is another one of the technical companies I wanted to mention. I almost forgot. They just came out, and I think I'm going to do a report this week on it. They just came out with a watch that has a micromotor in the escapement. Actually, I think I did mention them earlier in this episode, but I'll mention them again because I'm about to close. They've come out with a watch, Horage, who also make the cheapest tourbillon, Swiss-made tourbillon for like I think 8 and change, because the tag is 10 and change. But Horage has just come out with a watch with a micro motor in the escapement, so that I'm not in the escapement, at the balance wheel, at the adjustment, and you can use an external electronic control to move that micromotor, that servo mechanism that they've put in the balance, to adjust it, to regulate it. So you'll be able to regulate your watch to within a tenth of a second. I mean, if you're that anal retentive, yeah, every couple of days you could regulate it because it's an external regulation, and you're just moving the, the spring back and forth. Microns. Not, I mean, not even a millimeter, right? So like maybe half a millimeter, less than a quarter millimeter, because don't forget, you move the balance just a little itty bit, and it makes a big difference. And so this new Horage electronic, externally controllable regulation system, a perfect example of advanced technology in a mechanical movement. And they're so proud of it. The face of the hands are actually on the back of the watch. The face of the watch is an open movement, and then it has the time just in a little window at the bottom. It's a cool piece representing the advanced level of tech in mechanical watches. Oscar, how's it going? Oh, sorry, I apologize. I'm closing up. We've been up for an hour. I'm closing up in the next few minutes. But if you have a question, I will answer whatever you have to ask right now. Gian, at Sam, you might want to look into Oris as well. Oris is good, and yeah, I was saying it earlier. Oris is a great alternative. They're one of the few Swiss watchmakers that's independently owned. Oris owns themselves. They're not part of a group. That's something to be said for them. Yeah, see, Oscar and Gian know each other. Buy the seller, not the watch. Exactly, Weppington. And that's excellent last comment. We'll let you have the last word. Thank you all for watching. I always like to end on the hour because I know we're rolling, but that gives us stuff to talk about next week. You have a fantastic week. I love you all, and have a great evening as well. Oh, Gian, you're always welcome. All of you are welcome. I wouldn't be able to do this without you.